Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about section 5.3. It's kites and trapezoid properties. So now we're going to start to look more in depth at specific polynomials. Today we're going to talk kites. A kite is a quadrilateral, so a four-sided figure, with exactly two distinct pairs of congruent consecutive sides. So what that means is you have two sets of congruent sides, and the consecutive means that they're right next to each other. So my congruent sides are here up on the top next to each other, or down here on the bottom, and they are next to each other. So that's what the consecutive sides part implies. Okay, then we have some angles in here, and we call the ones between the consecutive congruent sides, we call those our vertex angles. And then we call the ones that are between the non-congruent sides the non-vertex angles. So we're going to refer to both of those. All right, so kite properties. We have some properties that are specific to just a kite. The non-vertex angles are congruent. So the ones that are between the non-congruent sides are congruent. Okay, the diagonals are perpendicular. So when we have diagonals that go from corner to corner, they are perpendicular. The diagonals connecting the vertex angles is a perpendicular bisector of the other diagonal. So that means that the long one here in this picture splits the short one into two equal parts. It's not always the long one versus the short one, but it is specifically for this kite. Okay? And the vertex angles are bisected by the diagonal. So what that means is that these angles here are congruent to each other because it's bisected. And then these ones here are congruent to each other because it's bisected. All right, kite properties. You're going to want to know these four kite properties. Then we have trapezoid. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair of parallel sides, and that goes for any trapezoid. Then we have a specific trapezoid whose non-parallel sides are congruent. And that one's an isosceles trapezoid. Kind of like an isosceles triangle where we have the two legs that are congruent. Here we have the two sides that are congruent. So these are parallel, and that's what makes them a trapezoid. We're going to call the parallel sides bases. And I don't have this typed, but the ones that are not parallel sides are the legs. Okay? And then these ones here are legs. All right. We have base angles, and our base angles are the ones that are by our bases. And then that goes for the top part too. So lots of little arrows here. You might want to write out base angles in those. Then trapezoids have some properties. All trapezoids have consecutive angles between the bases that are supplementary. So that means that these two angles are supplementary, and these two angles are supplementary. Okay, so the one from the bases. Okay, and the same goes here. These two angles and these two angles are going to be supplementary. I'm going to erase those. So I'm going to have some markings on there. The base angles of an isosceles trapezoid are congruent. So that means when the legs are congruent, these bottom angles are congruent, and these top angles are congruent to each other. And then also in a isosceles triangle, the diagonals are congruent to each other. So the diagonals are congruent. All right, so these are properties that go just for trapezoids. And you're going to want to keep these in mind as you do out these problems here. All right, we'll see you guys later.